This is the Panasonic Lumix 25mm F1.7 ASPH micro four thirds lens with the model number H-H025E-K. It was announced in September 2015 and is made out of plastic and it weighs 125 grams. It has a length of 5.2 centimeters without the lens hood, obviously, as you can see, and it has a filter thread size of 46 millimeters. It has a maximum aperture of f1.7 and a minimum aperture of f22, and it has 7 aperture blades. The minimum focusing distance on this lens is 25 centimeters, and it has a diagonal angle of view of 47 degrees. It has a lens hood thread, so you can attach a plastic lens hood to it. And when you buy the lens, it comes with a ring to cover up the lens hood thread as well. So if you wanted to attach something on top of the lens, then you could use that ring to cover the lens hood thread and then attach a matte box or whatever you wanted. The main disadvantage of this lens is that it has focus shift, so it front focuses a little bit, which won't be a problem if you have set it to an aperture such as f5.6 or above. But if you have set it to f1.7 or a large aperture, then you'd probably notice that your pictures won't be 100% in focus. And aside from that, it doesn't really have any other disadvantages. I mean, it doesn't have a focus clutch, but that's not a thing on Lumix lenses anyway, and it's not weather sealed. I don't think at this price point weather sealing is expected from lenses. And the advantages of this lens is that it's very small and very light, so it weighs 125 grams and it's only 5.2 centimeters tall. And it has a maximum aperture of f1.7, which is quite bright, and a minimum aperture of f22. So to compare this lens, the best comparison would be to the Olympus 25mm f1.8. So if you compare these two lenses, the Olympus lens is marginally heavier by 12 grams. So it weighs 137 grams and it's also slightly shorter. So if I take off the lens hood, should be able to see this easier. So on the left is the Olympus lens and on the right is the Lumix lens. So you can see that the Olympus lens is 1 centimeter shorter. So the aperture on the Olympus one is f1.8, whereas on the Lumix one is f1.7. So the Lumix has a marginally brighter aperture, but only marginally. Personally, I think overall the Olympus lens is better because it doesn't have a focus shift problem. So for that reason, I would go with the Olympus one. But the Olympus one does feel a bit more dense because it's smaller and weighs a little bit more. But the Lumix one is lighter and slightly bigger with a marginally bigger aperture. But if it front focuses, then I think those minor advantages become irrelevant. So I wouldn't recommend the Panasonic Lumix 25mm f1.7 over the Olympus one. I think the Olympus one is better. Another lens to compare this to would be the Panasonic Leica 25mm f1.4 Mark II, but I don't have that lens, so I can't show it right now. But that lens weighs 205 grams, so it's quite a bit heavier, and its length is marginally bigger. That one is 5.45 centimeters, but it has a maximum aperture of f1.4 and a minimum aperture of f16. So in terms of the minimum aperture, the Lumix lens has a minimum aperture of f22, whereas the Panasonic Leica lens has a minimum aperture of f16. But I think having a bright aperture at f1.4, which is what the Leica lens has, is more important than having a minimum aperture. The closest focusing distance for the Panasonic Leica 25mm f1.4 Mark II is 30 centimeters, whereas on this one is 25 centimeters. And again, I wouldn't recommend the Panasonic Lumix 25mm f1.7 simply because of the focus shift problem. But that conversation aside, the Panasonic Leica 25mm f1.4 Mark II, that has actually received high praise from anyone who's used it. And if you look on any website where they objectively try to measure the accuracy and image quality of that lens, it's also received high rankings. So the Panasonic Leica 25mm f1.4 Mark II is definitely a better lens. The only disadvantage it has is that it's slightly heavier and slightly bigger, but I think the advantages outweigh that. But then you also have to take into account the price of that. Another lens to compare the 25mm f1.7 to is the Olympus M.Zuiko Pro 25mm f1.2. So this lens weighs 410 grams, which is over 3 times heavier than the Panasonic lens, and is 8.7 centimeters. So it's substantially bigger as well, as you can see. But the advantage is that it has an f1.2 aperture, although the minimum aperture is f16, whereas on the Panasonic one is f22. The closest focusing distance on the Olympus one is 30 centimeters, whereas on the Panasonic one is 25 centimeters. And the number of aperture blades on the M.Zuiko Pro lens is 9, whereas on the Panasonic Lumix one is 7 aperture blades. So that should give you better background blur on the Olympus M.Zuiko Pro lens. And the M.Zuiko Pro lens also has weather sealing to IPX1 rating, and it also has a lens function button which you can press, and you can assign this lens function to anything you want on the camera. And it also has a focus clutch, so you can pull back the focus clutch and there you see the distance, and you can use it to manually focus the lens. And then when you want to go back to autofocus, you can push it forward again. So in conclusion, I would say the Panasonic Lumix 25mm F1.7 isn't a good lens because of its focus shift problem. But if you're shooting at higher aperture settings, such as 5.6 or higher, then that's not really a problem. And it's really light and relatively small, and the price is usually really cheap. So if you want something to just shoot around at high apertures, then I don't think it's a problem. You can use this lens and it will produce good results. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions about this lens, or if you want me to compare it to any other lens, or if you want me to test something with it. I am going to include the unboxing in the video so that people are aware on what actually comes in the box. So here you just have some information about the lens, its model number and aperture. And I think that's it. Doesn't say much on the box.
So I'm gonna unbox it quickly so that you can see what comes in the box and what's included with this lens. So there's a lens hood, and in addition to the lens hood, there's also a lens ring included, but the lens ring is attached to the lens itself, so you have to unscrew the lens ring first before you can attach the lens hood. So just keep that in mind.
And the instruction manual for the lens. I think this is just a leaflet that says which division of Panasonic this lens is about and what the manual is indicating. And this is the warranty certificate, so I guess you have to fill this in and send it to them. And then this is the guarantee leaflet.
So this is the lens itself. And the lens has the lens ring attached to it, so you have to unscrew and detach the lens ring before you can attach the lens hood to the lens. So just keep that in mind.